Why should you visit thechairshot.com? Thechairshot.com is your home for hard-hitting reviews, news, opinion, and analysis with attitude. Why? Because you're smarter than the average fan. Thechairshot.com. Always use your head.
Welcome to Kurt's Angle. It's Kurt Johansson here, and today we've got another episode of From the Ground Up. And today, very special guest, very unique story into how he got into professional wrestling. He's former British middleweight boxer that had a run of 12-1 and a 9-fight unbeaten streak, who's now turned the ring of a boxing ring into the squared circle of professional wrestling. It's RP Davies. Ryan, thank you for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing this. Like I said, with your story, it's really unique, and I think it'll be a great insight for those that are listening, and maybe those that are contemplating doing the same thing that might have been in boxing or a different sport, wanting to transition into professional wrestling or whatever else. So hopefully, with the light that you can shine on all that, it'll show really well for them.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, sounds good.
So I want to get into the, first of all, like, why wrestling? Like, what was your earliest memory of wrestling?
My earliest memory of wrestling, I think it was Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior when I was a kid. I think, I had all them toys, the toys that their arms didn't move. They had like locked arms.
Yeah.
Do you remember them? They're brilliant. They were my early memories of wrestling. I mean, I've been a wrestling fan since I've been a little kid. I think it was since I could buy action figures. And so whatever age that is.
Yeah.
And I think it was the colours of the wrestlers, like the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man and whatnot. And anyway, then I started watching it as a little kid, and it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate superhero show, isn't it? I say this all the time. As a kid, it's the ultimate superhero show. You've got your heroes and your villains, and they're all in, bright colours, and there's usually a story, and the baddie usually gets the upper hand, and usually, well, back then certainly the goodie usually makes his big comeback and gets the victory, and I think there's something that really spoke to me when I was a kid about them and about them stories. And I've been a fan ever since.
So despite your love for professional wrestling, you first love boxing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you was really successful with that. Unfortunately, you had to retire in September of 2017. I just want to talk about that for a little bit. Like, how was that experience? Because you was on a 9-fight streak as that was happening.
Yeah. I mean, it was very hard. I mean, like I say, I think my first love was, I know it sounds stupid, was probably wrestling.
Okay.
Because as a kid, that's what drew me in. But what it was is my family was a boxing family. So my granddad boxed in the army. My dad was a boxer. And I've said this before. There wasn't, certainly when I was a kid, there wasn't avenues to get into pro wrestling, or if there was, I wasn't aware of them. I thought, it had to be a big, 6-footer and 300-pounder to be a wrestler. But like I say, I was always a massive fan, but boxing was far more accessible due to obviously my family and even in the area I come from, Blackpool. There were a lot of gyms around. And I just fell in it. I fell into it like that, really, because I think I wanted to be a little bit like my dad and my granddad, and I went down that road, and I'll never regret it because I love the sport of boxing. And it's given me every good thing that's come from my my life has come from boxing, including wrestling, which we'll get back to. But yes, it's that's the way I went, and we had a good run. We had a really good run at it, and me and my dad worked together. He was my full-time coach, and we had 13 pro fights. I had 9 unlicensed fights, and I won the British title twice on the unlicensed scene.
Oh wow!
So yeah, no, I did really well, and that's where it come from, really, because I never boxed amateur. I went straight into the unlicensed boxing. But we did better than we certainly anticipated we would there, and it was from what we did on the unlicensed scene. People started saying to me, "Would you think about turning professional?" And of course, straight away I thought, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." It's, what an honour to be able to say I've been a pro fighter.
Yeah.
So we went down that road, and like I say, me and my dad, we set our own little gym up, and we went to work, and we did well. We had 13 fights. I won 12 of them. I lost an early fight. Redirected myself. Went up a couple of weight divisions. I went a little bit light early in my career, and then I went I went up a little bit. Felt a lot more comfortable, and then since then, never lost again, and I won 9 on the bounce.
Yeah, you got steam, and you was ready to probably go after the British middleweight title.
Yeah,
go on.
we were looking at the English title. That was the first stop. I mean, the ultimate aim was to win the British title. But what we did is we had a few title fights lined up. Just before I packed in, my next fight was for the Central Area title. So we were going to try and win that, and then move from there straight onto an English title. And then once you win an English title, obviously it's a matter of time until you get a chance to fight for the British title, and that would have been really, it'd have been a perfect ending really to the whole story of my boxing.
Yeah.
But it got cut short, and I could never really understand why I'd give so much of my time to something like boxing, and it ended the way it did. But now I see that maybe everything I always ever did was leading me to where I am now, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So obviously it was like a risk of brain damage. Was that something? Did you have symptoms for that, or is it just something that came up?
No, what it is, as a pro fighter, you've got to do, and it's rightly done. It's rightly done. It's very safely done, and they do think of the fighter's health now. And what you do is every year you have a yearly medical. So you have your heart tests and your blood tests and all them sort of things. And one of them is an MRI scan on your brain. So they do a test on your brain just to check everything's okay and whatnot. And anyway, I had a few of them in the 3 active years I was boxing, but this particular one came back different than the other one. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but something's changed in that time. Now, what I think what people get confused by is I think they think that I was injured that badly. I had to stop boxing. I never actually had to stop boxing.
Okay.
I was given a choice. They said to me, this is kind of like a 3 striking you out policy we have. You've had a change here, but this happens a lot in boxing. I mean, you're getting hit in the head, for a living. These things happen, but obviously we have to monitor it. But I wasn't happy with that when I heard it. Although obviously I was fully aware of the risks boxing brought into my life. At the same time, I wasn't in a. It was kind of like a realization of God, something's changed here, So I went to see a few specialists, and anyway, long story short, when I weighed up the options, I just didn't think that. I saw it as like a bit of a sign, really, and I didn't think the risk was worth me going forward. On the back of that, I was about a week away from having my first child, my daughter Bo, and it just come at the time in my life when it wasn't about me anymore, and I just it's the hardest decision definitely I've ever had to make, but I just thought, you know what, this isn't about me. This is about the kid, and I want to be with her. And so, I stepped away, and I wasn't in a great place for a little while with it, but it seems to have worked out for the best now.
Yeah, you've definitely come out the other end, and all respect to you as well. Like, you see it in so many different sports where people have given their life to it, and when they're having to retire, they don't really want to until they're forced to.
Yeah, exactly.
There must have been some sort of comfort. And although you said you was in a dark place, you did it on your own terms to make sure
I did.
Daughter.
Yeah, 100%, and you're 100% right. I did it. I got out on my terms. I got out on my terms because and I really do. I can't stress this enough. I love pro boxing. I love boxing. I love the sport of boxing. I love much more than just the action of it and what it is. I love everything that it means and what it can do for people's confidence and what it can do in terms of getting you fit and the whole kind of metaphor of boxing that I love. But as much as I love it, I do not love it more than I love my family and the people around me. And so, although it was a hard decision, it wasn't a hard decision in that way because I would never have chose it over them.
Yeah. No, all respect to you, and like, although your professional career is over, you've still got your boxing gym with your dad. Tell everybody a little bit about that and your personal training you're doing.
Right. Well, when I was boxing, we set up a gym for me to train out of, and like I say, it was great. But when I packed in, then we were in a position where my career had come to an end, my boxing career had come to an end. And we had to think of what we could do going forward. Now, we had this gym that I'd trained out of. And we just simply thought, what we'll do, we'll repurpose it and we'll still do the thing that we love. Me and my dad love boxing and we love being around boxing and teaching boxing. And so we opened it up more for the general public and it really took off and I can't thank the people, certainly the people of Blackpool, but the people around me, my supporters when I was boxing enough, because when I packed in, I thought that could, maybe be a dint on my business rather than anything, but it wasn't. It was the opposite. People kind of flocked to come and train with us, and I think it, certainly was a tad out of, loyalty to me. They wanted to kind of support me and get behind me, even though something bad had happened. But I can't thank them enough because the business really took off, and now we have a fully functioning gym that's busy every night. With great people, and the good thing about the gym is we kind of aimed it with the business idea of it being a gym for everybody, and it wasn't just to be a great boxer to come down to my gym. In fact, it's the opposite of that. You can come from any background, you can come from any walk of life, and you'll be looked after just the same down at my gym, because I think boxing can be for everybody. It's a way to get fit, it's a way to talk to other people and socialize. And it can be done in the right way and in a safe way, that you don't have to come down and think you're gonna get knocked holes out of just for trying out a sport. It should be something that can be accessible to everybody. So that's what we've tried to make it, and it seems to have paid off because the gym's gone from strength to strength.
No, brilliant. And for those of you that are listening that are based around the Lancashire area, if you are interested in doing that once the pandemic's all over, head over to rpdboxing.com. You can have a look at details regarding the gym and the personal training that Ryan's doing. So I'd highly recommend that. So
thank you.
You're welcome. So moving across to wrestling, I think your first match would have been, you got into wrestling about 19 months after doing the retirement. So when did training start happening, and how did that even come about?
Right. Well, that came about. I was about a year into my retirement. I'd ate a lot of ice cream and drank a lot of beers in that year. I watched a lot of Disney films with my daughter, but I got a phone call. I got a phone call from an old friend of mine called Johnny Brannigan, and I'd known Johnny for years, and he'd been a friend of mine, and he'd supported me in my boxing. But I knew he'd always been involved in pro wrestling and independent wrestling.
Yeah.
And he rang me up and he said, "Rai, I know you've always been a massive fan of wrestling, because just to give you a bit of backstory, the way we linked wrestling to boxing is when I was boxing, I always would come out to the ring. My ring walk was always to a wrestler's entrance theme." That was like that was like a nod to my friends who I knew were in the crowd, who we'd stayed up for the last 10 years watching the Royal Rumble at 1 o'clock in the morning together. So that was like a little nod to them, so that they got a bit of enjoyment out of the show. But yeah, like I was very vocal. I'd always been vocal about being a wrestling fan. And Johnny knew about this, and he rang me up and he said, "I know you've always been a wrestling fan. Have you ever thought about doing anything?" And I said, "Are you having a laugh, Johnny?" I said, I'm 12 stone and 5'10". I said, "But what can you do with me?" And he said, "Well, there's plenty I could do with you." He said, you said you've been a professional fighter. He said you've had a great career, and these things I can do with that. So I put the phone down and I thought, nah, I'm past that now. My athletic career has come to an end. Maybe it's time to step away from all that. And then, I looked in the mirror and I realised I'd put on some bad weight, and I wasn't really myself. I wasn't the person who I think I am. Inside, I didn't resemble that when I looked at him in the mirror, and I thought, you know what, this could be exactly what I need to try and get back to what I think I can be.
Yeah.
So I saw it as a bit of a challenge. And obviously it was an exciting challenge, because it was something. It was a bit, a big passion of mine was wrestling, but I'd never done any myself. Certainly not properly. So I rang you back up. I said, "You're all right, Johnny. Let's have a go. Let's have a try with it." And yeah, I've never looked back. I genuinely have never looked back. It started that day, and it's been by far one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I've absolutely loved every second of it.
So, which training academy did you go to start training to be a professional wrestler?
Well, at first, my first few lessons was with Johnny himself. He had been a wrestler, a very good wrestler, and he helped me. He helped me and went over a few things with me, just to get me the basics of it. And from day one, I started to realise the mammoth undertaking that I'd got myself involved in, because it all of a sudden I started to understand how complex and how many different things were involved in this. But like I say, I'm the sort of person that I'd made a decision, and I'm a man of my word, and I said I'd do it. So that was it. I was in then, and so I dug in and I got through it. But I trained with Johnny. We went down to a few schools. Went to the GPW training school. We went down to pinfall training schools, and then it's kind of it's kind of snowballed from there, because I go all over the place for training. I go to John Kenny's, I go down to Fighting Spirit. Also, I've been to so many. There's so many, but I purposely train with CJ Banks. Down in the Preston school there. I try and get in as much training with as many different sort of teachers as I can, because I'm in terms of ego, I haven't got an ego in terms of wrestling. I know that I'm starting out here, and I know that the only way I can get better is just like boxing. I've got to listen, and I've got to take on board people who know better than me at this stage, and try and learn as much as I can, and I've got to learn it as quickly as I can as well, because I'm not saying I haven't got loads of time, but I've got to speed. I've got to be faster than everyone else, because I've started so late.
Yeah. What was your family's reaction? Obviously, you've retired from boxing due to like the 2 tests you had regarding your brain, and you thought, nope, it's not worth it. And now you're going into another physical sport where concussions do happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was their reaction like?
Well, yeah, at first they were a little bit hesitant. I think they were a little bit hesitant. But the way we looked at it was they are two very different things. But wrestling has possibly more dangers in it than professional boxing, which I know a lot of people won't believe, but there's so many dangers in pro wrestling, and the chance of injury is so high because of the amount of stuff that these guys do. I mean, they are unbelievable, and the ladies, but the men and the women, they're unbelievable athletes, and the things they're doing is very dangerous if not done correctly. And of course there was a massive chance of injury, but there was a difference in my case of what it was with me was constantly getting hit in the head, not just for a fight, for week training camp, in sparring, leading right up to a fight. So ultimately it was just the amount of blows I would have took to the head over the course of not even a year. In 6 months I would have been, I maybe have done 200, 300, 400 rounds of boxing in them times. And so in terms of what I didn't want to happen was another change on the scan. I didn't see that risk as worth undertaking. Whereas pro wrestling, of course, there are chances to get injured. Of course there are, but at the same time, in wrestling, we try and work together. We try and work together to get us all through the whole job safe and put on an entertaining show. Whereas, the aim of boxing is to hurt each other, and people don't like to hear that, but that is we don't go in with the intention of wanting to hurt anyone, but that is the intention. The intention is one of us goes down, or I hit you that many times that by the time that the result comes in, the judges have no choice but to give it to me. So they are two very different things like that. But I had to talk them around a little bit because obviously they did understand the dangers of that wrestling would pose towards me. But the way we looked at it was a way to get me back doing something very athletic again. But possibly for my injury, certainly a slightly safer option than what I was doing.
So how did you find the differences between like the boxing training and the wrestling training? Obviously you said you're getting hit quite a lot, but in terms of like the physical aspect of it all.
It's been an eye opener. It has been an eye opener. That's what I'm saying. Like you'll never hear me put wrestling down or all the wrestlers down. I mean, these guys and girls, as I just said, are phenomenal athletes who I can only take my hat off to because, I've been a pro athlete for the last decade of my life, and some of the things that these guys are doing is mind blowing. It is mind blowing, and in the 10 years that I've boxed, I had a few sore knuckles. My nose was a bit sore from time to time, but that was about it. I had a black eye from time to time. In the less than a year that I've been wrestling, my hips are sore, my knees are sore, my elbows are sore, my necks are sore. There's so much that goes into it, and the bumps, and just generally putting the moves together and make it and putting the moves together and doing them in the right way as well. There's so many risks involved. But like I say, it's been an eye opener. But I have enjoyed the challenge of it. It's been really, really has been phenomenal, and I've loved every second of it, and I want to carry on with it now.
How's the adaptation of like you mentioned earlier in boxing? You're going out there, you don't want to seriously hurt somebody, but you do need to put them down, or you need to hit them as many times to win.
Yeah.
How's the adaptation of having to kind of pull back your punches, making sure you're not dropping your opponent in a wrestling ring?
I think when I first started, I think certainly a couple of the guys who were working with me were a little bit worried that I was going to, start dropping shots in and get a bit carried away. But no. It, you know, I always understood. I always understand, what I had to do to make it work. And it hasn't been easy because obviously my first instinct is to strike. Whereas you've got to trust in your partner, trust in your opponent more in wrestling, certainly than in boxing. In boxing, it's all about you, whereas in pro wrestling, it's about both of you. To make the best, the most entertaining match that you can put on together. But yeah, no, there's been adaptations that I've had to try and get used to. But I've always felt all right with that because I like to think I'm a very good listener. So I listen to the people I'm working with, and I try my very best to put into practice what they're asking me to do.
No, brilliant. So, how long had you been training before you finally made that debut in front of a live crowd?
My debut, when I actually made a debut in front of a live crowd, it wasn't for a wrestling match. The way we did it, I got brought in from the crowd. I was sat in the crowd, and a wrestler ended up dragging me into the ring, and we went from there. That's how we got things started off. But I think I've been training for that about 2 weeks before that happened. But then obviously that's what I mean. It's been a snowball because I had to really speed up everything that I was doing, and I learned. It sounds daft that I'd learned some more advanced stuff before I even knew any of the basics, because I knew that to put this across to an audience, they weren't looking. Certainly for a debut, they weren't looking at me to how good my wrist lock was going to be. They were they wanted to see a few other things. So no, that's how we started, and then I debuted in April. So I think I'd been training for about 3 months, 4 months before my first ever actual match.
What was the reception like to those that you was training with? Like, so early on, you're getting put on a show. Like, what was your training colleagues' reaction like?
To be dead honest with you, they were all brilliant with me. They were all really, really good with me because they understood that obviously I was a beginner, and although I was athletically quite good, there was so much I had to learn. So they were really kind of patient with me, and they tried to help me out and make me as best as I could, because I think they understood as well when they got to speak to me that it was about making the actual show, the best it could be. Not just me, just making the whole show, and if I could, get on that wrestling show and put a good match on and bring a lot of people there to watch me as well, because that's part of the key of it. Bring some of that support base and that fan base that I had from my boxing to the show. That it benefits everybody, and I think they realised that. I think they realised the more eyes on the show, the better for everybody. So they were really, really helpful, and I can't say one bad thing about them, because they all really tried to help me and make me as best as I could be, in such a short space of time.
No, brilliant. So your debut, was that with Ground GPW?
Yeah. I started out with GPW, and GPW will always have a kind of a special place in my heart, because for me, without them, there was no wrestling for me. It was Johnny who approached me, and he got me involved in wrestling. So I kind of feel like I'm their boy, if you will. For as long as they need me, I'll be there for them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I started my debut in April against Mickey Barnes, who's a big wrestler, but a fantastic wrestler, and a top guy. But we did this match, this kind of big guy, big wrestler versus boxer kind of match, and it went well. It went really well for a debut. It went really, really well, and the crowd loved it. I think we brought every time I think we bring something over 100 people with us from Blackpool down to Wigan to watch the shows.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, the mental they were always were. I always had a great following when I boxed, and I can only thank people because they seem to support me no matter what I do. So they supported me with my gym when I've turned to professional wrestling. Although that wasn't for everybody that follow me in boxing, they still came. And what's happened is over time they've become fans. They've become fans through it because they've come to watch it to kind of support me, but they found themselves, I think, enjoying the shows and enjoying the rest of the matches and what wrestling can bring.
Yeah. And since that, you've been on like every show with GPW. Obviously, you followed your debut match with a lumberjack match against Mickey Barnes. Like, what was the feedback from your peers and those behind the curtain after your first couple of matches?
Well, the first two matches certainly with Mickey, I think they were seen. I think they were seen as being really successful because the crowd were massively into both matches. I mean, the second one, the lumberjack match, it got made main event of the show, which I think is a little bit unheard of. I think certainly for your second match ever to be in a main event on a stage like that, and I mean it was a packed out room. But it went well. It did really go well. I can't be too critical of myself because I was proud of them two matches because I think they did what they were meant to do, and that was to tell this story of a boxer who'd been dragged into the world of wrestling and they went very well. Now, of course, if we looked at the matches, in depth, I'm sure there's a lot that I did wrong there. I'm aware of that, but at the same time, I think the way and the crowd and everything made up for that, and the atmosphere was so much that you maybe missed a lot of that because of how hot the crowd were and how much they enjoyed it. So the first two matches certainly I would have said went over really well, and everyone backstage gave me lots of supportive things and said a lot of nice things. So that was great. And then since then, it has been the same. Everyone's given me loads of positive feedback, but obviously a little bit of constructive criticism as well now because after that it was stuff like 6-man tags and tag team matches and battle royals and stuff like that. And at the same time, the first two matches was about this kind of, there was a bit of a gimmick behind it. Whereas now I'm trying to establish myself as a wrestler. And so to establish myself as a wrestler, I have to take all criticisms on board because the only way I'll ever get better is by listening to people and seeing what they're thinking that I could potentially do better and then doing them things better.
Yeah. What was the best bit of advice you've been given, and who was it from?
Oh God, there's been loads of people. There's been loads of people that have given me great advice. Davies been genuinely, I've got good relationships with CJ Banks, with Mickey Barnes, Sam Gradwell. I've become good friends with, and he gives me loads of advice all the time.
Yeah.
John Kenny, great guy. And then they all try the very, very best to help me out. But I would always go back to the person who has helped me, in my heart the most and has kind of explained things in the way that I've understood it the best is probably Johnny.
Yeah.
And he's been, very honest with me from the start. But his advice was wrestling is about storytelling. And I've always kind of believed this as well. He said, you can do all the moves in the world, but you've got to make the crowd believe what you're doing. And I think certainly for me that resonated because at 33-year-old, am I going to be able to learn every Roman Greco move known to man? Maybe not. maybe not at this stage. But if I can make my character and my matches mean something with the crowd, no matter what I'm doing, I don't have to be hitting these kind of lucha libre moves every 5 seconds to impress them. I've got to impress them by putting solid matches on and matches that they believe in. and that's the way I'm going to go with it. You know, when I grew up, you know, what brought me to wrestling was guys like I say, Ultimate Warrior, Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin. These were larger than life characters, kind of thing. You know, and although there were great wrestlers around, you know, around all them times, but you had great wrestlers like, I don't know, Chris Benoit, for instance, Kurt Angle. You know, you can go on and on and on. They were never the guys that really. Of course, I enjoyed them. A lot of what Kurt Angle did, I loved, because I thought he did a lot of good comedic work and stuff like that. But that style of wrestling was never really what blew me away. What blew me away, as daft as it sounds, was stuff like Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, which was maybe not classic wrestling, you know, but to me it's so exciting. It was so exciting. So yeah, you know, I've tried to take Johnny's advice on board there, and that's try and really work on my character and try and put across matches that mean something.
100%. And yeah, past couple of matches with GPW as well, you've been going against Lucas Steele, where you've been having a feud with him, losing the first, but then coming out on top in the last man standing. How have those two matches been for you?
No, they've been brilliant. They've been brilliant. I mean, like I say, when I got paired with Lucas at the beginning of the year, I mean, it was certainly it came a bit left field, because I'd worked with the bad lads. I'd worked with Drill and Mickey and Big Joe, and it had gone really well. But all of a sudden, they were putting me in with this guy who I'd seen around shows before. I'd not really spoken to him. I'd seen him around shows, but I mean, looks the part, is the part. You know, massive things being said about him in regards to his future and whatnot. And I thought, God, you know, like, I have to step up here. I don't, you know, what can I bring to the table here? But in all fairness to Lucas, he was excellent with me backstage, and I think he understood the situation I was in and how early I was into things. But I'm proud of them matches, both the matches, because they've gone exactly how we wanted them to go. And again, that I'm sure there's a lot of things that I can work on in the matches, but I've had great feedback. I actually I've become reasonably friendly with William Regal in my time in wrestling, and I actually sent him the match.
Yep.
The last man standing, and he sent me pages of feedback about it. You know. And they're all very, very positive things, really positive things about both of us, about me and Lucas. So that's great. That's really, really good. So, you know, I was happy with their matches, and you know, I think they were certainly the next stage for my wrestling career at this point, because I think they've set me off on a new trajectory now. I think the first year established me as a, you know, a new face on the scene. I think these two matches with Lucas have kind of shot me off now, because, you know, you've got to keep the momentum's high now after beating Lucas on the last show. So I've got to keep that. I've got to keep that rolling. I've got to keep that going.
Yeah, 100%. And keeping that rolling, you're going to be facing Lucas and a mystery guest, a mystery partner, whilst you're teaming with CJ Banks. Whenever that'll happen now, because of this pandemic that's going on.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier CJ Banks. He's somebody that you train with, that you become close with. How does it feel to be teaming with somebody of such, like, he's one of the best here in the UK, like, pound for pound, when he's in that ring, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. And a top bloke. But as a wrestler, you know, unbelievable. But this one, I mean, I need to be with guys like this. I need to be with the, you know, the top guys to help me get better in a quick time. You know what I mean? And CJ's been phenomenal with me, and he's really tried to help me trying to adapt as quick as I can, and he's trying to bring stuff from my boxing into the wrestling so that it's unique as well, you know. And he's been nothing but help to me.
Okay, so you mentioned William Regal, and it's somebody you've been in contact with. How did that relationship come about? What was your first contact with Regal?
I know it's bizarre, isn't it? It just
Is it the Blackpool connection? Or?
Yeah, it is the Blackpool connection. I mean, what actually happened was about 3 years ago. I don't know exactly. No, it'd be longer than 3 years. About 4 years ago, NXT came to Blackpool, didn't they? Do you remember the original? Finn Balor and Sami Zayn and Baron Corbin. They were all there. The original NXT. They came to Blackpool and did a show from there, and they did it at the Winter Gardens, which is where they'd just done the last NXT takeover. But the night before, I'd boxed professionally there. I'd boxed at that venue. And then, obviously, knowing that the next night was NXT, and we got some tickets. We got some tickets to go backstage and everything, to go, to walk around backstage and meet some of the wrestlers and stuff like that. And we did, and it was great. But we kind of got formally introduced to William Regal, and he was such a top guy, and he sat with us all, me and my group of friends. They were all mad wrestling fans, and we had a really brilliant night. And he sat with us for a good half an hour and really talked about wrestling and all that. And weirdly, it was like a precursor to what was coming, because at the time there was no intention of me wrestling. But now I see that, everything for a reason. And he was telling us all about the ins and outs of wrestling and whatnot. Anyway, that was that, and we had the night, brilliant night, and it went. Then I got into wrestling a couple of years later. And weirdly, one of my old trainers, who helped out when I was boxing, was friends, actually direct friends with William Regal, and this is how it all come about. And he obviously knew me, that I'd started wrestling and whatnot, and he got in contact with William, and when Regal was coming over to Blackpool for this latest NXT UK takeover. He rang you up and said, "Do you want to come and see Ryan's gym? And while you're here, and we'll have a few pictures and everything." And he said, "Yeah, of course I'll come." So I was completely underprepared of what was going to happen, because I genuinely just thought it was going to be him come down, the local paper take a couple of pictures of him, with his fist up, and that'll be the end of it, and it'd be over. But he come into the gym and he said hello, and again, just as lovely as I remember him. But within 5 minutes, his jacket was off. He had me in a ring, and he had me in a front face lock. And I'm thinking, what is going on? Do you know what I mean? Where has this come from? But he spent again a good half an hour, 45 minutes, going over holes and just the kind of the psychology of wrestling. And again, a massive memory for me, that, no matter what happens with this wrestling now, that's always going to be something that stays with me, that a guy who I grew up watching and kind of idolized, because, obviously the connection with my hometown and everything, come and spent half an hour with me and did some wrestling with me in my own gym. So yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there, really. And we've become friends. And we talk and everything, and he's just a really, really nice guy, and he seems to be interested in my career and how he can help me improve and continue to improve. So we're just going to try and go with that and see where it takes us.
So obviously with Regal's connection and things like that, and now you mentioned at the beginning, when you was a child wrestling, you didn't know how to get started, and it was few and far between with the schools available. Now we've got a performance center from WWE here in the UK, and that pathway to WWE is more accessible than it's ever been for a British wrestler. Is that something that you've got your eyes set on?
It certainly wasn't something that I had my eyes set on, because when I started out, GPW was kind of my WrestleMania. That first match was my WrestleMania. Just to have a wrestling match would have been that was the goal. But I've always been someone who's always kind of strove for more in everything I do, and wherever I'm doing, I want to be, I want to be one of the best at, or certainly aim to be one of the best at. And so obviously, since the wrestling's took off, I would be lying if I said that I wouldn't want to see how far I can get with it, and whether that's the performance center for WWE. I mean, I'm not getting ahead of myself. Who knows? It's very, very early days, very, very early days. But I'm willing to kind of ride the wave for as long as I can and see how far I can get with it. Definitely.
Yeah, well, you're a natural athlete, and again, they don't just look at, say, the elite caliber of independent wrestlers. They look at all these different athletes from all over the world. We've seen it with Luke Menzies. He's gone from rugby to now his Rich Holland character in NXT and
Yeah,
NXT UK.
yeah.
So I think that is a pathway. Is that anything you've spoke about, Regal? Has he given you any advice on what you need to work on before that opportunity?
He's given me loads of advice. Gives me loads of advice. I mean, we don't talk directly about me about me joining him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But we talk about the things that I can do to be as believable in my character as I can be. I mean, what Regal tells me a lot is that I've really got to stand out. I've got to stick with my one unique skill, and that's the boxing background. You know, he said, you know, don't be like every other British wrestler out there, but a poorer version of them. Do you know what I mean? And I understand that, because if I try and be a you know a British pro wrestler, I will be a worse version of many British pro wrestlers. Do you know what I mean? Because they've been at it for years, and they're excellent at the role. But what I have got different to everyone is I think I'm the first ever ex-professional boxer in that, you know, that's actually took it up full time. You know, in the country. So I've got to use that the best as I can, and I've got to work that into my movement, into everything I do, my moves. You know, everything I do has got to kind of revolve around that base, really. And you know, that's going to be quite tricky. Of how do I incorporate that, you know, fully into a fully wrestling match? But if I can do that, that will make me. I think that certainly will make me more unique, because I'll be doing something different than anyone else, you know, on the scene. So that's the aim anyway.
Yeah. So want to do one thing. So obviously you've jumped across to wrestling, and obviously there's white collar boxing as well, where anybody for charity can put it together. So if you was to pick a couple of people from the wrestling industry that you work closely with, or anybody you know of, who would you want in that white collar boxing match? Not against yourself, but against each other, or just to try and take it up?
Well, that's a great question. I tell you what, there'd be some cracking. I'd sell that show out. That would be a sellout show, wouldn't it? Hey, if I could convince them all to do that, that would be a show.
I want free tickets at least.
100%. I want tickets to that show. No, listen. So far, all the guys who I've met and friends with and whatnot around, I think these are tough men. They're tough men, and I'm not gonna berate them, because you know what they're doing. You know, they've earned my respect 10 times over, because I know now how much some of this stuff hurts, and you know, these guys just get on with it. Boxing is different. It is different, of course. But do I think some of these, a lot of the guys who I've met could adapt to boxing? Yeah, I do, because they're such good athletes, and that can only help them. But who would I think could? Well, I think for one, I know Lucas has done a bit of boxing before. You know, and he's a big boy. He's a big boy. So I think you'd have to stick him in there at some point. Like, I don't know who we're putting him in with, but he'd be definitely in there. Who else have we got? They're all. Who else can I think of off the top of my head that would be good anchored to boxing? I was speaking to Sandy Beach. He's a really good athlete, really good athlete, and he was talking to me about maybe wanting to do some boxing, and I think he'd be good at it, because he's, like I say, got great physique on him, and he looks fast and got a good athletic build on him, long arms, stuff like that. So I when he told me that, I thought you might be all right, son. There's a couple.
Yeah,
there's a couple I'd like to see.
So what about for like your peers back in boxing? Like, obviously you said yourself, especially in Britain, you're the first professional boxer to turn essentially like a full-time pro. Obviously Anthony Ogogo, he had a fight with WAW, and now he's signed with All Elite as a developmental wrestler. But he's not physically wrestling. Who else would you be interested to see, even if it's just for that one big match, like that WrestleMania match, like you mentioned with your GPW debut? Who else would you want to see in the ring? We've seen Fury do it.
From the boxing, but yeah, we saw Fury did it. And, you know, the Fury one, I mean, it wasn't great, was it? You know, in terms of the match, in terms of the match itself. And I'm a Fury fan. But you know, I can completely understand why he did it, because that was to get him more recognised in America, you know, and get to get his name out there in America. And what better way to do that than with the WWE? And it worked straight away, because everyone now knows who Tyson Fury is. Then when he got into that rematch with Deontay Wilder, they all knew who he was. And
most of them was cheering for him.
Yeah, of course they were. Because you know he's made his name there, and he's smart, really smart business. That's what he's done. He's been a smart businessman. But who else from boxing would I like to see in? Who would I like to see in pro wrestling? Let me have a think. You're asking me some very good questions today. Tough questions. Let me have a think. Who I think would be bang on for it. I think Canelo. The Mexican fighter, Saul Alvarez, who's like a kind of a mega star anyway in boxing. But I think he would bring such a massive fan base with him. You know, especially kind of from the Latin American fans. You know, a bit if you a bit Eddie Guerrero, if you will. I think you know they can be so passionate and so loud. I think Canelo doing some sort of angle would be brilliant, because of the amount of exposure that it would get to both wrestling and boxing now. And then away from that, I would love to see Conor McGregor do something in pro wrestling, because I just think he's made for it. And you know, Conor says a lot of things that I think annoy a lot of people, but I've always been a fan of him, and I like how he's brought a bit of pro wrestling into you know the real fight game, and I think he would admit, I don't know that for a fact, but I think he would admit he's a big fan of wrestling, because a lot of what he does kind of comes from that world. Yeah. And I think that would be dead interesting to see him appear in a wrestling ring, in a WWE ring or something like that, and do something.
No, 100%. It's a bit like what we mentioned with what you liked in wrestling originally.
Yeah.
It's the larger than life character, which exactly. McGregor and Fury have.
Of course.
It's bringing that to the ring. So just before we end on like your goals and aspirations, I usually do, whether it's collaborating with other podcasters or when I'm doing an interview, is something called One More Match. So I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Okay.
So it can be anybody that's in WWE or anybody throughout the UK or anywhere in the world. Just a couple of opponents, like who's on your bucket list essentially to wrestle.
Oh God. Well, as you can imagine, I'm not going to say any big names in terms of WWE guys, because I'm not looking that far ahead. I'm just not looking that far ahead. But these plenty of guys I would love to wrestle on the independent scene now. Obviously, we're friends, but I'd like to wrestle CJ. I think you know he's right up there for me. I would love to wrestle, and we've discussed it together, but I would love to wrestle Joey Hayes down the line at some point.
Yeah.
I just think as a babyface versus babyface match, that could be big down the line, because he's got such a great support. Certainly anywhere he goes, but certainly at GPW. And I have a massive support down at GPW. I think that could be a big match down the line. And I'm doing a disservice to millions of guys, because there's so much. Everyone could make me better. Do you know what I mean? Everyone could. You know, I've mentioned you before. Sandy Beach, I think, is a really good talent. Big Joe's a great talent. There's so many. It's so hard when you start thinking. You think you start answering the question. You start realizing how many people you're missing off the list. But I'd like to wrestle a lot of them, but I would say my top two. I'd love to wrestle CJ Banks, and I would love to wrestle Joey Hayes at some point.
Okay. Yeah. Nah, they'd be huge, especially with like Joey's history in GPW as well, and just around that wrestling scene. Like you said, he's got a massive fan base, and it would be interesting, especially seeing like you've main evented once. Who's to say you can't be doing it again? What are your goals and aspirations, whether they're short term or long term? Like, have you looked at different countries for training, like Japan?
No, not that I wouldn't, but at the minute, I'm very happy. I'm content in what I'm doing. I'm working for a couple of different companies. I've worked for a few different companies now, but like on more of a full-time basis. Obviously, GPW. I'm working for for the foreseeable. I'm doing stuff with Pinfall in Salford, who've been very good to me and help with my training. And they've been really good to me. And I've started working with In-Out Wrestling now as well. And they have been so good with us. So good with us. And, I'm excited to work with all them companies. And they've every single company there that I've named, they've got such a great roster of wrestlers. And that's why I'm excited to work with them, because there's so many options for me to wrestle and such a variety of people for me to wrestle on all of them. So that's one of the aspirations, is to get as many matches in as I can with these companies, and try and for every one of them as well, bring as much exposure to them as I can. That is one of my aspirations. That's something I've done from day one. I've tried to bring my boxing following, with me, and I have successfully so far brought them with me, and that's why I think I've been given the chances I've been given, because at the end of the day, money always talks, and luckily I've had a great support who's kind of followed me, and because of that, that's why people are willing to put me on shows, because they think, he trains hard, he tries hard, but at the end of the day, he puts bums on seats for us, and that's what we want.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. So just to close it off, excuse me.
Sorry.
So yeah, just to try and close it off, obviously this is from the ground up, and you've certainly done that in a short space of time.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to anybody that's thinking of pursuing professional wrestling or just getting into training, especially from being in a different sport previously?
Well, all I would say is the only advice I can give you is my own, and that is, I have been a big fan of this business my whole life, and when I jumped into it, there was part of me that was hesitant in jumping into pro wrestling. But all I could say now is if you have a passion for it, if it's something that you enjoy, 100% try it. At least try it out, because it's been so good to me. It's been so good to me. But the wrestling community, because that's why I would call them. They're like a family. They are like a family. The wrestling, all the wrestlers, that they've been so helpful to me, and they've been so nice, and definitely welcoming. I felt welcomed. Whether they all have been, I'm not sure. I'm not. What I'm saying is, I don't know if there has been anything untoward to me. I certainly don't know about it. But certainly to my face, they've been so nice and so helpful, and all I could ever recommend anyone to do is, if it's something that they would enjoy, or they feel that they have a like for, 100% try it out. It's a brilliant business. It's a tough business, and there's so much to it that it's so complex, but at the same time, so rewarding. And that's one of the main reasons I've done it and stuck with it, is because it gives me a way to interact with a live audience again, and that's I think that's what I've found that I've got the most out of from this. I've realised how much I enjoyed that, as a boxer, but certainly as a wrestler. For me, making the fans happy and making the kids happy there, that really does make this worthwhile for me. It makes me feel like I'm doing something worth doing. and that's why I want to carry it on. And so that feeling's hard to replace, and that's why I would recommend it to anyone who wants to do something good, and something productive. Give pro wrestling a try.
Yeah, no, brilliant, Ryan. So let everybody know, like, where can they find you? Are you doing any online stuff for your personal training? Let them know.
No, I'm not doing any online stuff at the minute. I've given people a break from me for a while. No, but when this pandemic's over, and hopefully, and that's for everybody listening, hopefully that won't be as long as we're thinking, guys, and hopefully we'll come out the other side of it. When that does happen, I'll get back in the gym. And the gym's open, and the gym's open for all, as I said before. So anyone listening, whoever in the Blackpool area wants to try us out, please, more than welcome. Pop your head in, and you'll be made to feel very welcome by me and my dad. And then straight back to wrestling. That's the thing. When this is over, we've got this show for GPW coming up. Hopefully that date will go ahead, but who knows at this point. But if not, it'll be moved to a later date. But all the companies I spoke about then, GPW, Pinfall, and In and Out, check them out, because they're all brilliant and put great shows on, and I'll be on every one of them shows. So I'm looking forward to getting back to wrestling. I've missed it in the week we've had off. I've missed it, and that's a good sign. Yeah,
no. So where can they find you on social media?
Social media on Twitter, I think I'm RPD Fighter, at RPD Fighter. On Facebook, I think I've got my own wrestling page, RP Davies, or you can just find me on my personal one, Ryan Davies. And what's the other one? Instagram, I think I'm RP Davies again. Could be wrong, but I think I'm RP Davies again. Who knows?
Well, Ryan, thank you for coming on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Really intrigued to see what the future holds. For what you've achieved in your first year of wrestling's been remarkable. And it's good to see that despite having to walk away from boxing, you've found this essentially, and you found yourself again. So all credit to you for that.
Thank you very much. That's what it feels. That's what it feels like. It feels like I'm not to go a little bit soppy on you right at the end, but it feels like it feels like destiny. It does feel like destiny. It feels like everything I've ever done has led me to this point. And I've enjoyed every second of it. And I want to just carry it on now, and I want to see where it goes. If it's meant to be, it will find its way, I think. So we will see. We'll see where the journey code takes us, mate.
100%. So everybody, thank you for listening. This has been Kurt's Angle podcast from the ground up with RP Davies. Make sure you check him out on social media. And again, if you're wanting to do some personal training or getting into the boxing scene, and you're in the Lancashire Blackpool area, make sure you check out rpdboxing.com. Check out Ryan's website there. And until next time, thanks for listening.